Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
The opposition leader takes issue with government's decision to stop an appeal regarding former Marathon MP Jerome Fitzgerald.
The leader of the opposition responds to allegations that the government's payroll increased by $10 million under the former PLP government.
Just one of the most wanted suspects appears before court today.
The environment minister defends the government's rent-to-own program. That story coming up.
News is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina McNeil. Topping news tonight, opposition leader Philip Davis asserting today that something stinks about the government's decision to drop an appeal on parliamentary privilege involving environmental group Save the Bays and former cabinet minister Jerome Fitzgerald. According to attorney Fred Smith, QC, the government has filed notice of its intent to drop its case against the Supreme Court judge's landmark ruling on the boundaries of parliamentary privilege. However, Davis asserting that the Court of Appeal should be allowed to hear the case. Kyle Joaquin tells us more. Kyle?
Well, Christina, opposition leader Philip Brave Davis obviously not happy with that article he read in this morning's Tribune. He said government now has the responsibility of bringing a bit more clarity to that issue.
It doesn't smell good either, Mr. Speaker. And I gave reasons why I think it doesn't smell good. It smells. It smells. It smells. Whatever great respect the member may have for me, right? He ought to have concern about the separation of power and the import of this decision on all of us as members of Parliament.
In August, Supreme Court Justice Indra Charles ruled that Marathon MP Jerome Fitzgerald infringed on the constitutional right to privacy of the Save the Bays members when he read and tabled their private emails in Parliament and therefore could not be protected by parliamentary privilege. Justice Charles ordered Fitzgerald, who was education minister at the time, to pay $150,000 in damages for the breach and granted a permanent injunction barring parliamentarians from accessing or making public the personal information of the nonprofit organization. Fitzgerald subsequently filed an appeal to have Justice Charles' ruling overturned. He argued that Save the Bays was not a legitimate environmental organization and his sole purpose was to destabilize the PLP government. Well, Carmichael MP Desmond Bannister rose on behalf of the government explaining why the government reached that decision.
Speaker, the honourable member well knows that the courts made a decision that someone had done something improper. If that person is aggrieved, then that person has a right to appeal. Not to expect the state to pay for his appeal, to carry his appeal. The state has determined that it is not going to do so.
A firestorm erupted after Fitzgerald read those emails last year and wouldn't disclose how he got them, only saying they came from his political garbage can. A status hearing has since been set for June 26th. In the House of Assembly today, Davis took grave exception to the appeal being dropped and insisted his own privilege was now being breached.
The government ought to have some explanation, right? And if the explanation is, well, look, we as the government are not prepared to fund the litigation any further, the next question I would have to ask is whether you inform the other litigants about it before filing a notice of discontinuance. See, a notice of discontinuance has in fact been filed.
Bannister went on saying that Fitzgerald was a senior member of the last government and knows what to do if he wishes to continue with that appeal.
It is an appeal that impacts an individual, and that individual has a right to appeal, to take it to the Court of Appeal and to make a determination, to take over his appeal if he wishes, which the government is carrying. And these are very, very senior members of the Mr. Speaker. They know exactly what to do.
Now the House Speaker asked the House members to refrain from commenting on the issue, at least until the status hearing, which is scheduled for June 26. Reporting from the House of Assembly for our news, I'm Kyle Joaquin. Back to you, Christina.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, Davis also slamming comments made by Minister of State for Public Service Brensel Roll, who charged that the government's payroll increased by $10 million in the last 5 months of the Christie administration. Giorgio Bain reports.
Davis released a statement over the weekend asserting that the Minnis administration has made untrue and groundless accusations about how much the government's payroll increased by during the final 5 months of the last Christie administration. Minister of State for Public Service Brenzel Rolle fired back in Parliament today and suggested that Davis's comments should go before the Committee of Privilege. While Davis did not refute Rolle's comments, he added that statements do flow from an administration that has a disturbing habit of making reckless and false accusations. The Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador MP questioned the need to involve the Committee on Privilege when his comments were not made in the House of Assembly.
So I expect better of you. But the other good advice would be, Mr. Speaker, that we don't have to be engaging the time of the House in these matters. If when allegations or accusations are made, they are particularized. Because if they are particularized, if you, for example, brought what you say will come sometime during the course of this debate, how you arrive at your $10 million increase in payroll for the last 5 months of the Christie administration, if you had done it then, maybe this would not have arisen.
However, House of Assembly Speaker Houston Moutry insisted that it is a matter for the committee, which comprises of South Beach MP Jeff Lloyd, Yamacraw MP Ellsworth Johnson, and Mount Moriah MP Marvin Dames from the governing side, along with Davis and Hannah Martin from the opposition. Anglerston MP Glenys Hannah Martin also questioned the move.
You've indicated that a prima facie case has been established. You've had one assertion and another. And I'm just wondering the basis on determining that a prima facie case has been made. The assertion has been made that all these things have happened. Nothing has been laid. We've been told at some point down the road, through the corner, we will get proof of the allegations and assertions made in this House. This member has said those verbal assertions are not correct. So I'm just wondering, we are leaning in favor of what here now? If the member asserts that his privilege has been violated, and he has evidence to establish that, then he should do so.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Giorgio Bain.
In other news, 1 of 7 wanted men hunted by police over the weekend was today charged in connection with the stabbing death of 55-year-old Valdries Bowleg. April Sands has the details.
Well, police have managed to put Ronald Nottage behind bars today after conducting a major manhunt over the weekend. Just 3 days after police pledged to track down several murder suspects, one of them, 45-year-old Ronald Nottage, was arraigned in the magistrate's court. Nottage, who appeared before Chief Magistrate Joyanne Ferguson Pratt today, was charged with the murder of 55-year-old Valdries Bowleg. According to police reports, the Peters Street resident was stabbed to death inside her home on June 7th. Nottage, who was recently released from prison for causing harm to Bowleg, was not required to enter a plea. He was denied bail and remanded to the Department of Correctional Services. He will return to court on July 20th when a voluntary bill of indictment will be served. Reporting for Our News, I'm April Sands.
And 29-year-old Ricardo Russell was charged in the magistrate's court today with the murder and armed robbery of Livingston Roll. According to police reports, Roll was shot to death at Okra Hill near the Old City Lounge shortly before 5 p.m. on June 5th. Russell was not required to enter a plea. He was denied bail and remanded to the Bahamas Department of Corrections. He will return to court on July 20th. And Environment and Housing Minister Romuald Ferreira is slamming critics who claim the location that has been selected for the government's rent-to-own housing project is simply too close to the New Providence landfill. Ferreira insisting that whenever there is a fire at the dump, it impacts everyone. Our Jasmine Brown has more.
Ferreira blasted those critics, insisting there is nothing wrong with the project's location. While contributing to the budget debate last week, Ferreira revealed the location of the housing site, noting that 72 homes will be completed in the new Carmichael West subdivision, located off the Sir Milo Butler Highway. That particular subdivision is located on a tract of land opposite the Coca-Cola plant. Critics have complained the site is unfit as it is only a mile away from the dump.
Well, I mean, the landfill is in the center of the island. I understand the concerns. The concern is really if there's a fire event at the landfill, wouldn't this impact those residents? And it would impact many residents throughout the country. As a matter of fact, there's no place on New Providence that you cannot be potentially impacted by a land fire event.
In March of this year, a major blaze at the dump blanketed the nearby Jubilee Gardens in heavy smoke for nearly a month, forcing mandatory evacuations and school closures. The Environment Minister says the ultimate solution is dealing with the dump, something he says is high on his agenda.
Whatever happens at the landfill, it has to work. You know, the technology has to be right, and then the business plan has to work.
The project is a part of the Minnis administration's campaign promise of meeting the demands for low-cost housing. In the speech from the throne, the Minnis administration made a commitment to address the mortgage crisis facing many Bahamians through legislative reforms and the promotion of home ownership programs. When asked how soon the project would get off the ground, Ferreira admitted many details still have to be worked out.
We need to devise the specifics of the rent-to-own because there are different kinds of legal documentation that would involve the consumer instead of a specific mortgage. We have acquired the land. I've been advised that the land has been acquired, so it's just the logistics of that, of how do we move forward from here? How do we have the documentation in place?
Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Still to come on our news, diplomats appointed under the PLP administration given just over a month to come back home. Plus, police are still searching for suspects following the customs warehouse break-in. That's coming up when our news returns.